Hello good people, I'm Dmitry, and there was a case that arrived back in January. So right after CES I received this massive box and we can finally do something together with it, shall we?
Hi Fred. It is this, my friends, the Corsair Obsidian 1000D.
And so this thing has literally become a piece of furniture for my hallway. I'm gonna finally take it out. No joke, when this thing was delivered, the FedEx guy told me he had a hernia surgery next week. I laughed because I thought he was kidding. I'm such a jerk. Yeah, this thing is heavy. How do you take it out? Oh! So this definitely needs two people to carry and potentially a separate apartment too. Maybe I need a bigger desk too. Man, this is huge. It really is like unboxing a piece of furniture. So these are our side panels. I can feel it right underneath here. Oh yeah. And now I somehow need to remove the cardboard. Need more light. Wow. Now that is a monster.
So it is slimmer from what I remember at Computex, but I'm guessing that's a good thing, you know? They slimmed down the frame a little bit while it still accommodates dual systems and crazy amount of water cooling. Should be fun.
Now normally I don't like gigantic enclosures. I prefer small, compact, simple ATX systems. But I feel like for this one, we're definitely gonna have to do something special. But first, let's see what makes the 1000D so unique right after this.
The new Mastercase MK750 keyboard comes with a comfortable magnetic wrist rest, beautiful RGB light bar on the perimeter and per key lighting control with a variety of Cherry MX switches and a bottom Type-C connection. Cooler Master doing it right. Check it out below. Alright, so the Obsidian 1000D is like on a whole other level of a case. It's not particularly for me, but I appreciate what it can do. It's pretty clear that this case is designed for water cooling builds only, and I think it's there to directly compete against the Phanteks Elite, as they're roughly the same size and support a dual system and a dual power supply configuration. It's a huge case. Here's me for size reference. They've really not held anything back for radiator clearance, so I think it should be pretty clear who the target audience is and why this case exists.
I do want to say the build quality in the 1000D is actually pretty spectacular, despite the entire frame being out of steel. You know, nothing creaks and it doesn't feel cheap when I'm handling the case. It is incredibly heavy, so definitely just keep that in mind and have your back ready for when you need to work inside something like this. But build quality, no complaints or any red flags throughout my experience with it.
As with previous Obsidian cases, I appreciate that it doesn't have branding all over the place. The front glass is spaced out for that unrestricted airflow, and the Corsair logo is hidden behind the dust filter that illuminates once you power on the system. It's an elegant case, and I feel that Corsair has an advantage with the price at $499, almost half that of the Phanteks Elite, and their approach to simplify the frame to make installation of hardware easier is actually pretty awesome on all levels. That means we have easily removable gigantic dust filters at the front and the top. They slide out and are also magnetic, plus the mesh is super fine, but I really like their approach to fan brackets that sit on rails, slide fully out of the case to make mounting easy, both at the front and the top. By default, we have a 120 mount x 8 bracket at the front and a 140 mount x 3 for the top, and they are interchangeable since the sliding mechanism is identical. And there's also this secure flap to prevent the rails from sliding out. Now I'm not sure if having a 140 mount only at the top is a good default configuration. Perhaps if the bracket was interchangeable with 120 and 140 millimeter mounts, it would eliminate any incompatibility with your choice of radiator, but you can purchase additional brackets for 120 sizes, and there's even a bracket for dual 200 millimeter fans. And for rear exhaust, we have a dual 120 mm mount because the height of the case allows for that many fans. Just keep in mind the 240 rad here is not possible because the rail closes off that clearance.
Actually, I take that back. You can mount a 240 rad in this rear section, but only with the tubes at the bottom. So right now, if I line the holes, here we have the radiator making clearance right below the bracket, so there are no issues, but only if the tubes are sticking from the bottom.
Now, I'm going to need your suggestions as what type of system I should build inside the 1000D, and I'm not really a water cooling enthusiast, and I've only done one water cooling system with just a single loop for the CPU. It was inside the Cooler Master 693. That was a fun build, but you know, the 1000D really does inspire me to do something special and go back to the water cooling days to see what we can do with this giant case. Wow, that rhymed. And I will be approaching it from a dual system configuration, and we'll see if that makes sense. And yeah, should be interesting. Coming inside, the motherboard tray is well equipped for eATX motherboards and beyond. There are standoffs already pre-installed. There's a second row of rubber grommets and this multi-mount ventilation looking area for reservoirs. We have additional rubber grommets above the motherboard tray, and overall this is an extremely open layout with about 5.5 inches of clearance above the motherboard and 5 inches from the front bracket till the hard drive cage. So it's a bit surprising to me that the second ITX mount is right below the main motherboard. That means you'll need to water cool that one also, or use a low profile cooler to avoid any clearance issues. And to keep the frame pretty slim, we have our main ATX power supply alongside an SFX L power supply in the third chamber for that second system.
So for that second power supply mount, you have to remove this little piece here that allows the ITX motherboard installation. So it makes sense. You only remove it if you need to install the second system. So here it is. Your SFX L mount sits nicely secure here with a little ventilation area. But notice this. Check this out, the side panel doesn't close because of this bottom SSD mount, which you can relocate to the top here. So there are 4 positions, but otherwise, it closes just fine.
The main I/O includes 4 USB 3 and dual Type-C Gen 2 ports, plus the power and reset for one of the systems, while the other set of power reset connections is located in an awkward spot behind the case. I don't know if this separation makes sense. I've never owned a dual config before, but just having 2 power buttons right at the front would be definitely more convenient. Now, the rear chamber is actually pretty clever in that these French doors completely conceal your cables and storage area, so when the glass panel is on, you don't have to worry about loose cables or the panel not closing properly. In total, we have 6 SSD caddies on these French doors and a conventional drive cage with 5 vertical caddies, plus the Corsair Commander Pro, which is necessary for a case of this caliber. It has 6 PWM fan headers, 2 USB motherboard pass-throughs, and optional LED connections for the lighting of the Note Pro. Now, I'm pretty happy they did not include any fans because for a case of this caliber, any builder will use their own, but I was hoping that we would see a second Commander Pro. And this way, you'll be able to connect a minimum of 12 fans instead of 6 for a case that can support up to 20.
And so the Corsair Commander Pro is super important here because it is your fan controller, it is your lighting controller, it allows other USB accessories to pass through it, so it doesn't have to occupy USB headers on your motherboard, and you control all that through the Corsair software, so it's a nice little hub for control. And the fact that they only include one here may not be a disadvantage because you can use fan splitters and connect at least 12 fans in here. And I know for their like overkill system that they've showcased at shows, they used 4 Commander Pros to connect all those fans. And so that's something to keep in mind for a case of this caliber. It's good that it's included because it does nudge you into this direction to potentially purchase more of these.
Also, the drive cage is non-removable unless you Dremel out the rivets, and I assume wiring the SSD caddies will introduce its own set of challenges based on their orientation. As for the side panels, they're just a giant slab of glass with aluminum front and back. I appreciate that they're off the case during shipment, so handling the frame is much easier because it's lighter, but keep in mind the tint is quite dark and illumination is necessary to reveal anything behind it. And also because they're quite heavy, opening them up may tilt the entire enclosure if it's empty, so keep that in mind for safety. And just for fun, before we journey out into building an epic system in here, I'm quite nervous doing like a water cooling build, going from 0 to something like that. I installed an ATX motherboard just to give you a reference point at how big that interior is. We have so much space above and in front of the motherboard for thick radiators and push-pull, so that should be fun. So I'm thinking X299 for the main ATX motherboard and a gaming ITX system with like Coffee Lake CPU, and I am happy to say that there is a rubber grommet behind the ITX motherboard for all your connections and cabling. Should be pretty clean job for cable management.
Now for water cooling enthusiasts, they would absolutely appreciate all this additional space above the motherboard tray. To me, it's a bit strange to see a 45mm radiator with a set of fans and then yet have so much extra clearance above the motherboard, but this entire area is intended for push-pull with thicker 60mm rads, for sure.
Alright people, so what do you think of the Obsidian 1000D? For $499, is that a good price to pay for a case of this caliber? I'm not exactly sure, I've never done builds like this, but it's definitely cheaper than the Phanteks Elite, and I would say it's in competition with what Thermaltake offers with their gigantic enclosures too, specifically for water cooling. So wish me luck, the second phase of this entire project is just beginning. I'm excited to share my journey along the way. Let me know what you think of this case in the comments below. Make sure to check out this other relevant content, and we'll see you in the next video.